A few nights ago, my friend called me with a plant emergency. They said there was something wrong with the plant and they needed help figuring it out. So as their plantie or plant auntie, I was there to help them troubleshoot and figure out what was wrong with their orchid. Hi, welcome to Attainable Green. I'm Jess, and today we're going to be talking about how to troubleshoot your orchid and understand the growth pattern of a Phalaenopsis. I mentioned that my friend called me and they wanted to figure out what was wrong with her plant. So to give you some context, I'm going to share some details and kind of walk you through about how we understand and diagnose and problem solve to figure out what's wrong with our orchids. So first off, she mentioned that she had this plant. It's a Phalaenopsis. She got it 2 years ago, and that was the last time it bloomed. Since then, there has been new growth like new leaves and new roots. She also noticed that for the past several weeks, there has been a flower spike that has been coming from the main stem. It grows for about a couple of inches and then it kind of dies back. Now this has been happening for the third time, so she's been asking what is she doing wrong and why does it keep dying? She really wants to get this plant to bloom, not only for her and because how much she enjoys the beauty of these flowers, but that her partner doesn't really like orchids and he thinks that if you're just leaves and it's not growing flowers, it's useless. So it might be time to toss the plant and get a new one. Before tossing the plant away and getting a new one, she wants to try and see if we can induce this flower to bloom. I needed to see what the photo of the plant looked like. And she was pointing out to me where the flower spikes were and what it was doing and all of that. Now, as she was talking about the plants, I was wondering about where the flower spike was, and she said that she kept cutting them off because they weren't growing anymore. It would grow to a certain length and then stop growing, so she would just cut it off because she assumed that it died. So first of all, there is some basic anatomy about what a Phalaenopsis plant looks like. This plant has a central stem from which the leaves and the roots emerge. Now, the roots can emerge from the lower section of the plant, but it can also emerge from any point along that main central stem between the leaves as well. Not only that, but the leaves tend to come out from the top of the plant, which is considered the crown. The flower spikes can emerge from one of two areas. It can emerge from between the leaf joints, or it can emerge from the top of the crown, and that is called a terminal spike. If you get a terminal spike, that usually means that the plant no longer will grow from that central point and it will have to make another growth point. So it may have to put out a keiki, which is a baby orchid or clone of itself. So a keiki or baby orchid can emerge from one of two places. It can come from the base of the stem or it can come from the top of the spike. And in those two situations, the baby plant is going to be connected and will need to be connected to the mother plant until it can grow its own set of leaves and roots and then support itself. So after understanding the basic look of this plant, my friend realized that the plant was actually growing roots, and that's what she was cutting off. So she wasn't cutting off flower spikes, she was cutting off the aerial roots of the plant. Now that is a beginner mistake because you don't know what a flower spike or a root looks like when it's emerging. It was totally by accident that she was cutting off roots, and that's okay because the rest of the plant was really healthy, so it's not a problem. But in the future, she knows not to cut the roots. When the spike comes out, it actually looks a little bit different than the root. When the root emerges, it starts off as kind of a rounded, pointed tip that starts off green, and then as it elongates, the area around it or the circumference of it becomes kind of that silvery color, and only the tip remains green. When a flower spike emerges, it kind of comes off through a slit, and so it kind of has a more narrow shape, and the top of it kind of looks a little bit like a mitten or a glove. As the spike elongates, you'll notice that the outer coating remains green and it doesn't turn silver at any point. So that is the major distinction between what is a root and what is a flower spike. So after figuring out that it was actually roots that were growing, then becomes the more pressing issue is that why won't my plant bloom? Why doesn't the Phalaenopsis bloom? Currently, we're in winter and the temperatures tend to be pretty cold. However, depending on your home environment, the temperatures might be really stable. And for a Phalaenopsis to bloom, it needs two things. It needs to have enough sunlight so that it can create enough energy and store enough energy to create a flower spike. And the second thing it needs is that it needs a drop in temperature. So usually during the cooler fall and winter months, a temperature drop of about 5 to 10 degrees for about 4 weeks or more can induce the plant to spike. Now, not all Phalaenopsis are what we call winter bloomers, so not all phals need this drop in temperature. For most supermarket orchids that you see in bloom almost year-round, it needs that drop in temperature because that's how the greenhouses and nurseries induce the plants to be in flower at all times. They just change the temperature, make it a little bit cooler, and then it'll initiate the spikes, and then you can have it at any time of the year. So my suggestion for her was to put the Phalaenopsis in a bright window, either east or west facing, and in a room that tends to be a little bit cooler. So you want it to get around 60 degrees or a little bit lower at night, just to help it induce some flowering. So this is one way that I found that can be useful to induce blooming for a Phalaenopsis. So we'll see what happens with my friend's orchid, and hopefully it will spike and bloom later in the year. So currently in my collection, the majority of my Phalaenopsis are currently in spike. Even the one that I thought was super stubborn and hadn't bloomed in like about 3 years is actually in spike this year. And I think that's also due to the lower nighttime temperatures in the house. So here in Southern California, we get cooler weather later than the rest of the nation. And I start to see spikes around this time, and then the flowers will appear towards the spring. So while phals are considered winter bloomers, here in Southern California for me, they tend to be more spring bloomers. So if you're trying to figure out what's going on with your plant, you want to look at a couple of things. So you want to make sure that your plant is doing well. So is it growing new roots? Is it growing new leaves? And then notice if there's anything out of the ordinary. Does it have spots? Does it have bugs? All of those things will help you figure out if there's something wrong with your plant or not. So I just wanted to share with you the story about my friend and how we kind of figure out how to grow plants better. And sometimes it may be something as simple as understanding the growth pattern or even the anatomy of the plant to figure it out. If there's something more serious, of course, then we can figure that out together. But for now, this is just a brief overview and a quick look into the life of being an orchid grower, especially if you're a beginner. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for Attainable Green to follow along on my orchid growing journey. If you want to see more videos like this and you have a question or a situation, please let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to answer them. And if it's a common problem, then I'll try to make it into a video. So I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!